Alright, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, an interesting physique update from Phil Heath. In this rare instance, this physique update, he's specifically showing off his midsection, which is really pretty cool considering the fact that that was the thing that he was really criticized the most for, and he's showing it off in this update confidently because it does look smaller. And keep in mind here, this is quote-unquote off-season Phil. Whether or not he's ever going to have another on-season, we don't know, but he's not prepping for a show or anything. It's not like he's getting close to a competition, so there'd be really no reason for him to be keeping his waist tight in the off-season. But he is, and it does look tight. So it kind of makes you wonder what he would look like if he were prepping for a show, if he were in competition condition. How good would his midsection be, or how improved, or how much smaller, how much tighter could it be if he was actually prepping for a show? Now, I'm still kind of convinced that we're going to see Phil compete again. He hasn't officially formally announced a retirement, and he's still holding on to a pretty good amount of size. I still think the Arnold Classic would be a possibility and a pretty big opportunity for him. And I think it's actually a show he could win. I think Phil 100% could win the Arnold still. A title which he's never won before. And in this post, he reflects back on his career, his accomplishments, and specifically one segment here. He says, I've accomplished a ton in my sport, but what my next climb on this mountain of life is something which I'm going to be most proud of. And I could be reading too much into this, but the fact that he speaks about kind of his future goals in the same post that he's showing off his physique kind of makes me think there's a shot that he's not done competing yet. Which honestly is still something I'm kind of torn on. On one hand, I want to see Phil compete because he's one of the greatest to ever do it, so for him to compete in any of these lineups would make the show 10 times more exciting. But on the other hand, Phil is in his 40s now, and we're seeing a lot of bodybuilders have health complications, especially the ones that are in that similar age range. Now, Cedric was a little bit older than Phil, Sean was a little bit older than Phil, but I think professional bodybuilding in your 40s is a little bit dicey, as Brendan Schwab would say. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Would you want to see Phil come back and try to win an Arnold Classic title, which is one of the only titles that he never won? The 2010 Arnold Classic, where he was the closest to winning, he took second to Kai Green. It would be a nice, I think it would be a nice cap on his career if he were to compete just one more time, for it not to be the Olympia, but to be the Arnold. And he is tied with Arnold Schwarzenegger. They both have 7 Sandows. I think it would be a nice little a swan song for him. Now, speaking of retirement, speaking of comebacks, we just talked the other day about the fact that Flex Lewis retired from professional bodybuilding. Now, Flex wasn't the one that announced it a few days ago. Dan Solomon announced it on his Instagram page after having the conversation with Flex on the phone. But today, Flex finally addressed this on his own on his Instagram, and he says, it's time. Although I wasn't the one to break the news on my platform, I want everyone to please understand my why. So I'm kind of wondering if he was upset that Dan Solomon was the one that shared that and didn't give Flex the opportunity to come out with that himself. He said, this was by far not an easy decision. It's been one that haunted me for a very long time, but this podcast will explain everything and more. So there is a podcast on his YouTube channel right now where he talks about this. I watched the whole thing, so I could talk a little bit about it here. So basically, one of the things that they discussed in that podcast that I thought was pretty accurate was something that I was thinking the other day when this announcement first came out was, yeah, it would be cool to see Flex compete in the Open Olympia. He hinted at it for the past 2 years, straight up said he was going to do it the past 2 years. And it was a very exciting prospect because we've seen some 212 guys come over to Open and be very successful. Flex Lewis is the most successful 212 bodybuilder of all time. He's got 7 titles. But, the point that they brought up in this podcast, and I was thinking the exact same thing, was it really does nothing for his legacy at the end of the day. The upside is very small. And the downside is very large. The downside being potential health complications. What could go wrong here? There's a lot of things that could go wrong with this comeback. And as good as Flex is and was, the reality of the situation is, would he have won this Olympia that he came back to? If he came back to the 2022 Mr. Olympia, is Flex Lewis beating Brandon Curry, Big Ramy, and Hadi Chupin? Would he be top 6? Probably, definitely. But if we're being completely honest and objective here, I don't think Flex would have won the Olympia had he competed. So that being said, if he were to come back and place 3rd, 4th, 5th, is that really worth the risk to his health? Because his legacy doesn't change. It doesn't really damage his legacy if he placed 3rd, 4th, 5th. But what's the upside? if he came back and placed third, fourth, fifth, other than just making the show more exciting for him and his legacy and what he's already accomplished. I don't think it would have really changed anything for him to compete. It would have been cool to see how he would stack up against the big guys, because maybe that's something that he always wondered about. And he also says he wants to focus on his health and his family and put more focus on his business endeavors more so than the bodybuilding side of things. And looking at all that, all that's happened lately, all the deaths in bodybuilding, it's really probably it's the wise call. God forbid, but what if he had came back, really pushed it, came bigger than ever, and that caused some kind of health complication that could have potentially taken him away from his family? Would it have been worth whatever placing he would have got at the Olympia? No. And look, the other thing too, like I said, his record, his legacy is cemented. I honestly don't think anybody is going to break his record. I don't think anyone will win more than 7 212 Olympia titles. I don't think it will be done. On one hand, I really don't think that the 212 division is going to be around much longer. I mean, the Arnold Classic 212 division was one of the biggest 212 shows there was, and they dropped that a few years back. I just feel like that division overall is losing popularity in comparison to one of the other newer divisions, Classic Physique, which is rapidly rising. And the other reason why I don't think his record will be broken is because I think we're going to have more guys like Derek Lunsford that look crazy. And they look crazy against open guys. And the prize money disparity between 212 and open is ridiculous. There is much more money to be made in open bodybuilding. So if you got a guy like Derek Lunsford that can hang with these open guys and he wins a 212 title, I would go to the Open Olympia. It's like 10 times the prize money. So that's kind of my thoughts on Flex's retirement. I think it was a good call on his part, and it was good to hear him speak on it and kind of give his own perspective and for him to formally announce it himself. Now, next up in the news, I did want to talk about Charles Griffen a little bit. He posted his reaction to his second place placing, which I was actually curious to see, because watching the live stream when they did the award ceremony, it looked like he was not happy with that placing, not one bit. And he confirmed that in this Instagram post. He says, well, that's another second place. I would be lying if I said I wasn't mad or bothered by this placing because we came to win. But onward and upward, putting this behind us and getting ready for what's next. I really appreciate all the love and support. Seriously unreal feeling. Thank you. But we will be on that Olympia stage this year. Mark my words. And he also posted this recent physique update showing off his legs and his vacuum pose. Now, as far as I know, both Charles and Blessing will be at the New York Pro to compete, as well as Justin Rodriguez, who took fourth here, and Max Charles, who took third. So we will get to see round 2, and I think it will be interesting to see if either Blessing slips or Charles slips, because I think if one of these guys comes in significantly different from how they looked in Indy, I think those placings could be tossed up. Especially if Justin comes in a whole lot sharper, Justin could end up winning that show. Blessing could come in the same, and he could win the show. Everyone else, Charles could come in even better, and he could win. I think any of these guys could win the show. But to the best of my knowledge, the only guy that's doing New York that didn't do Indy, well, I guess I should qualify that statement a little better. The only bodybuilder that I think is really dangerous that did not do Indy but is doing New York is Peter Clancer, who was unable to make it to the Indy Pro due to some travel issues. But as far as we know, he will still be at the New York Pro. He put that in his post where he said he couldn't make it to the Indy Pro. So Peter is a guy that could be another toss-up, another wild card in this lineup where he could come in and beat most of these guys. We don't know. Now, it will be interesting to see the lineup because I'm sure any day now they're going to be coming out with a competitor list since we're just days away from the show. So New York Pro, right around the horizon. I believe it's the 21st. So we're 5 days out right now. And the final story that I've got for you guys today, the latest physique update from James the Shed Hollingshead, a guy that we haven't talked about in a while. We last saw him at the Olympia where he did not do as well as he had hoped. He was kind of outside of the conversation. He was outside of the top 10. A lot of people expected him to be more solidly in the conversation. So he posted this physique update. He also recently left his longtime supplement sponsor, Redcon 1. He is now with Yamamoto Nutrition and beginning a new journey. And I'm kind of curious to see how this affects him because I believe, and I'm not entirely sure, but I believe he moved back to the UK from Florida now that he's no longer with Redcon and now that he's with an international supplement company. So whether that impacts what future shows he does, maybe he does, a UK show instead of one of the shows that's coming up over here. But he looks phenomenal here. He looks gigantic like he always does. He looks like he could be one of the most muscular bodybuilders in the IFBB. All the updates that he posts are super impressive. It's just a matter of putting that together on stage and bringing the conditioning that he brings, that grainy look that he has in a lot of these Instagram pictures. Maybe not so much now because he's in his off season. But in any case, I'm sure that we haven't seen the last of James Hollingshead. So that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did, in fact, enjoy it. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. Liking the video really helps out a lot. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet already. Click that bell notification icon. Nick Strength and Power. I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.